Have you ever felt like you're completely falling apart? Like the person you thought you were is dissolving before your eyes, and everything that once made sense now feels like a beautiful lie? Here's what nobody tells you. That feeling of "I'm falling apart" isn't necessarily destruction. It might be the most important expansion you'll ever experience. We live in a culture that treats any form of psychological discomfort as pathology. Feel confused? There's a pill for that. Questioning your life choices? That's depression. Seeing contradictions everywhere? You must be having a breakdown. But what if we've got it all wrong? What if that sense of everything crumbling isn't your mind breaking down, but your consciousness breaking open? What if the feeling of falling apart is actually the feeling of waking up to a reality that was always there, but you just couldn't see it before? Think about a butterfly in its chrysalis. From the outside, it looks like complete dissolution. If you could interview the caterpillar mid-transformation, it would probably tell you it's dying, that everything it knew about being a caterpillar is disappearing. But we know better. We know it's becoming something entirely new. Something with wings. The collapse you're experiencing might not be an ending. It might be a metamorphosis. There's a crucial distinction we need to make here. The difference between real fragmentation and painful clarity. Real fragmentation disconnects you from reality, makes you unable to function, leaves you genuinely unable to distinguish between what's real and what's not. But painful clarity? That's different. Painful clarity shows you things you wish you couldn't see. It reveals contradictions between what you were told and what actually is. It strips away comforting illusions and forces you to face reality without the buffer of denial. Real fragmentation needs professional help. Painful clarity needs courage, patience, and maybe a good friend who's been through it too. Most importantly, it needs you to stop pathologizing your own awakening. Hey, if this is hitting home for you, I'd love to have you along for this journey. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of this exploration. Trust me, we're just getting started, and the next part is where things get really interesting. Give this video a like if you're feeling that falling apart sensation and want to understand what's really happening. Your support helps me create more content like this, and honestly, knowing you're out there going through this too makes all the difference. Ready to dive deeper? Let's keep going.
So you've accepted that maybe, just maybe, you're not falling apart. Maybe you're seeing more clearly than you ever have before. But here's where things get really uncomfortable. When your perception expands, you start seeing patterns that were always there, hiding in plain sight. It's like someone just handed you a pair of glasses after years of squinting at a blurry world. Suddenly, you can see the fine print. You can read the expressions on people's faces that you were missing before. You can spot the inconsistencies in stories that once seemed perfectly logical. And it's overwhelming as hell. You begin to notice the hidden patterns everywhere. The way your friend always changes the subject when you bring up something meaningful. How your workplace talks about family values while systematically underpaying their employees. The disconnect between what people say they believe and how they actually behave when no one's watching. You start seeing the scripts everyone's following, including the ones you were following without even realizing it. The automatic responses, the social performances, the ways we all unconsciously participate in systems that don't serve us. It's like watching a play where everyone's forgotten their acting, except now you can see all the actors, the stage, and the puppet strings. This expanded awareness comes with a price, the brutal discomfort of recognizing contradictions everywhere. Internal contradictions hit first. You realize you've been saying you value authenticity while carefully curating every aspect of how others see you. You notice you criticize others for exactly the behaviors you exhibit when you think no one's looking. You discover that your strong convictions might just be inherited opinions you never actually examined. Then come the external contradictions. Society preaches equality while systematically maintaining inequality. Institutions claim to serve people while primarily serving themselves. Leaders talk about transparency while operating behind closed doors. The gap between rhetoric and reality becomes impossible to ignore once you start looking. Carl Jung understood this pain intimately. He wrote, "The expansion of consciousness is always accompanied by pain." This isn't some mystical suffering for the sake of suffering. It's the natural consequence of seeing reality without the comfortable filters we normally use. Think about those filters exist for a reason. They help us function in a world that would be paralyzing if we saw it all at once. They protect us from information overload, help us maintain social relationships, and allow us to operate within systems that are fundamentally flawed but necessary for survival. But when those filters start dissolving, when your perception begins expanding beyond your previous limits, you suddenly have access to information you weren't equipped to process. You see the complexity, the contradictions, the gray areas in a world you were taught to view in black and white. This is why expanded perception feels like falling apart. You're not losing your mind, you're gaining access to more reality than your current mental frameworks can organize. It's like trying to pour an ocean into a coffee cup. The problem isn't the ocean, it's that the cup was never designed to hold that much. The discomfort you're feeling, it's not pathology, it's growth pains. It's your consciousness stretching beyond its previous boundaries, and like any form of growth, it comes with temporary discomfort as your system adapts to its new capacity. But here's what's crucial to understand. This expansion isn't happening to break you, it's happening because you're ready for it. Your system wouldn't be opening up to these new levels of perception if you weren't equipped to handle it, even though it doesn't feel that way right now. The pain Jung talks about isn't punishment, it's the natural friction that occurs when consciousness rubs against its previous limitations. Every expanding perception brings you closer to seeing reality as it actually is, rather than as you were taught it should be. And that, as uncomfortable as it is, might be the most important thing that ever happens to you. Ready for the next piece of this puzzle? The expansion is just the beginning. Next, we need to talk about what happens when you hit information overload and how your mind tries to make sense of seeing multiple realities at once. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, and drop a comment if you're recognizing these patterns in your own life. Trust me, you're not alone in this.
Now we get to the part that really breaks your brain. What happens when you start seeing multiple realities simultaneously? You've expanded your perception. You're noticing patterns everywhere. And then something even more disorienting happens. You realize that conflicting versions of truth can exist at the same time, and they can all be accurate. Your friend genuinely loves you and is unconsciously manipulating you. Your job provides valuable services to people and exploits its workers. You're both deeply flawed and perfectly whole as you are. The political candidate has good intentions and is corrupted by the system they're trying to change. This is the shock of perceiving multiple realities at once. Your brain, which has spent your entire life categorizing everything into neat little boxes, good, bad, right, wrong, us, them, suddenly has to process the fact that most of reality exists in the spaces between those boxes. It's like discovering that what you thought was a simple black and white photograph is actually a complex hologram that shows different images depending on the angle you view it from. Except now, you can see all the angles simultaneously. Your mind starts to panic because it confuses this excess of information with chaos. Think about it. Your brain evolved to help you survive in environments where quick decisions meant the difference between life and death. Is that rustling in the bushes a predator or just wind? You needed a fast, clear answer, not a philosophical discussion about the nature of threat assessment. So when you suddenly start seeing the full complexity of reality, all the contradictions, paradoxes, and layers of truth existing simultaneously, your mind defaults to its emergency protocols. It interprets this flood of information as chaos
as something dangerous that needs to be resolved immediately. But here's the thing. It's not chaos. It's just more data than you're used to processing. You're not losing your ability to discern truth from falsehood. You're gaining the ability to see truth itself is far more complex than anyone taught you. You're discovering that reality operates in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And most of the contradictions you're seeing aren't actually contradictory. They're just different facets of the same complex whole. This creates what I call the paradox of expanded perception. The more you see, the harder it becomes to organize what you're seeing. It's counterintuitive, right? You think that seeing more clearly would make everything simpler, more organized, easier to understand. Instead, you find yourself drowning in nuance. Every situation reveals layers within layers. Every person becomes a walking contradiction. Every institution shows you both its benevolent intentions and its harmful impacts. Your old filing system, the mental categories you use to organize your understanding of the world, suddenly seems laughably inadequate. It's like trying to organize a library using only two categories: good books and bad books. You quickly realize you need thousands of subcategories, cross-references, and entirely new organizational systems just to begin making sense of what you have. The overwhelm you're feeling isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that you're attempting to process reality at a much higher resolution than you're accustomed to. Imagine you've been watching life on an old black and white TV with rabbit ears, getting a fuzzy signal that cuts in and out. Suddenly, someone hands you a 4K ultra-high-definition screen with perfect reception. The clarity is incredible, but it's also overwhelming. You can see every pore, every detail, every subtlety that was invisible before. Your brain needs time to adjust its processing power to handle this new level of input. The static and fuzziness of your old perception actually served as a kind of filter, reducing the complexity to something manageable. Now that the filter's gone, you're getting the full signal, and it's a lot. This is why everything feels like too much right now. You're not falling apart, you're upgrading your entire perceptual operating system while trying to continue functioning normally. It's like trying to renovate your house while living in it. Messy, disorienting, and temporarily chaotic, but ultimately necessary for growth. The key insight here is that information overload and chaos are not the same thing. Chaos implies randomness, meaninglessness, disorder. What you're experiencing is actually hyperorder. You're seeing so many patterns, connections, and layers of meaning that your current organizational systems can't keep up. It's the difference between a library with books scattered randomly on the floor, chaos, and a library with so many precisely categorized books that you can't find what you're looking for without a new navigation system, information overload. You don't need less perception. You need better tools for organizing what you're perceiving. The overwhelm is temporary. Your consciousness is simply adjusting to its new capacity, like your eyes adjusting to bright light after being in darkness. Give it time, and you'll develop new frameworks for organizing this expanded awareness, frameworks that can hold complexity without collapsing under its weight. Because here's what's really happening. You're not seeing multiple realities. You're finally seeing the one reality that was always there, in all its magnificent, contradictory, beautiful complexity. And once you learn to navigate this level of perception, you'll wonder how you ever lived with such a narrow view of what's possible.
Here's where it gets practical. How do you function when you're seeing everything at once? The expanded awareness you've gained isn't going anywhere. You can't unsee what you've seen. And honestly, you wouldn't want to. But you also can't walk around feeling like your nervous system is plugged into a lightning storm 24/7. You need tools, not to shut down your perception, that would be moving backward, but to create structure within the storm. Think of it this way. You've gone from living in a small cottage to suddenly inhabiting a vast mansion with dozens of rooms. The space itself isn't the problem. The problem is that you're trying to be in every room at once. You need to learn how to move through your expanded awareness intentionally, rather than being overwhelmed by all of it simultaneously. The art of internal containers. The first skill is learning to create what I call internal containers for your new perceptions. A container, in this context, is a mental space where you can temporarily hold a piece of awareness without having to immediately process, analyze, or act on it. It's like having a series of filing cabinets in your mind where you can store insights, observations, and realizations until you're ready to examine them more closely. Here's why this matters. Your expanded awareness is constantly picking up information that your conscious mind isn't ready to integrate. Without containers, all of this information floods your immediate consciousness simultaneously, creating that overwhelming sensation of too much, too fast. Practice the conscious shelf. When you notice yourself becoming overwhelmed by a perception or insight, mentally place it on what I call a conscious shelf. Say to yourself, I see this, I acknowledge it. I'm placing it here for now, and I'll return to it when I'm ready. This isn't denial or avoidance. It's conscious postponement. You're not pretending the perception doesn't exist. You're choosing when to engage with it fully. The relief is immediate because you're no longer trying to process everything at once. Breathing, your anchor in the storm. When everything feels like too much, return to the simplest thing, your breath. But not the shallow, anxious breathing that happens when you're overwhelmed. I'm talking about intentional breathing that creates space between you and the intensity of what you're perceiving. Your breath is the only thing that's always available to you, regardless of how chaotic your mental or emotional landscape becomes. It's your built-in reset button, your way of creating a momentary pause in the flood of awareness. Practice the observer's breath. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, breathe out for 6. On the inhale, imagine you're creating space within yourself. On the hold, rest in that spaciousness. On the exhale, release any need to immediately understand or organize what you're perceiving. The key is the quality of attention you bring to this breathing. You're not breathing to calm down, though that might happen. You're breathing to create enough internal space to observe what you're experiencing without being consumed by it. Writing, externalizing the internal storm. Your thoughts, when trapped inside your head, multiply and amplify each other. Writing them down doesn't just record them, it liberates them from the echo chamber of your mind. When you're seeing too much, feeling too much, processing too much, writing becomes a way of downloading the overflow so your conscious mind doesn't have to hold it all simultaneously. But this isn't journaling in the traditional sense. This is what I call consciousness streaming, allowing whatever you're perceiving to flow onto the page without editing, organizing, or trying to make sense of it. The magic happens when you externalize your internal experience. Suddenly, what felt like chaos in your mind becomes visible, manageable, separate from you. You can see it clearly instead of being lost inside it. The power of silence. In a world that's constantly demanding your attention, silence becomes a radical act of self-preservation. But I'm not talking about the absence of sound. I'm talking about the conscious choice to stop consuming information and start digesting what you've already taken in. Your expanded awareness is like having extremely sensitive hearing. You're picking up frequencies that most people can't detect. But if you never create moments of silence, you'll be perpetually overstimulated by your own perceptual abilities. Practice intentional silence. Create daily periods where you deliberately disengage from all input. No phones, no books, no podcasts, no conversations, no stimulation. Start with just 5 minutes if that's all you can manage. In these moments of silence, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're giving your consciousness permission to naturally organize and integrate what it is absorbed. Silence is how your awareness processes itself. Learning to observe without controlling. Here's the biggest shift. You don't have to do anything with what you're seeing. Your ego mind has been trained to believe that perception requires action. See a problem? Fix it. Notice a pattern? Change it. Observe an injustice? Fight it. But expanded awareness operates differently. It reveals without demanding immediate response. The need to control or immediately act on everything you perceive is what creates much of the overwhelm. You're not just seeing more, you're feeling responsible for everything you see. Practice the witness stance. When you notice yourself becoming overwhelmed by what you're perceiving, consciously shift into what I call witness consciousness. Say to yourself, I am aware of this. I don't need to fix it right now. I don't need to understand it completely. I am simply witnessing what is. This isn't passive resignation. It's conscious choice about when and how to engage with what you're perceiving. You're learning to distinguish between observation and obligation, creating rhythms of expansion and integration. Your consciousness needs rhythms, just like your body needs sleep. You can't operate at peak perceptual intensity all the time. You need periods of expansion when you're open to new perceptions and insights, and periods of integration when you're processing what you've already absorbed. Without these rhythms, you'll experience what I call perceptual burnout, a state where your awareness becomes so overloaded that it starts to shut down to protect itself. Practice the daily tide. Structure your days with intentional periods of opening and closing. Maybe mornings are for expansion, when you're open to new perceptions and insights. Afternoons might be for processing, when you work with what you've already absorbed. Evenings could be for integration, when you allow everything to settle and organize itself naturally. The goal isn't to control your expanded awareness. It's to develop a sustainable relationship with it. You're learning to be a skilled navigator of your own consciousness, someone who can move fluidly between different levels of perception without being overwhelmed by any of them. Remember, you're not trying to go back to seeing less. You're learning to see everything with greater skill, discernment, and sustainability. This is the difference between someone who's drowning in the ocean and someone who's learned to swim. The ocean doesn't become less vast or powerful. You simply develop the skills to move through it with grace.
This is where everything comes together, and paradoxically, where everything falls apart one final time. You've done the work. You've learned to navigate the storm of expanded awareness. You've developed tools for managing the intensity of seeing everything at once. You might even think you've reached some kind of stable ground. Then comes the integration crisis. This is the moment when your newly awakened consciousness tries to fit back into the structures of your old life and discovers that the container is too small for who you've become. The inevitable collapse. Let me tell you what no one else will. The collapse you're experiencing right now isn't a malfunction, it's a feature. Every system that reaches its evolutionary limits must break down before it can reorganize at a higher level. Your old way of being in the world, your previous identity, your familiar coping mechanisms, your comfortable relationships, they're all revealing their inadequacy in the face of your expanded awareness. This feels like falling apart because something in you actually is falling apart. But here's what your terror-stricken nervous system doesn't understand. Collapse is the first stage of conscious reconstruction. Think of a caterpillar entering the cocoon. From the outside, it looks like a peaceful transformation. From the inside, the caterpillar literally dissolves. Its entire structure breaks down into what scientists call primordial soup. For a period of time, it exists as neither caterpillar nor butterfly, just undifferentiated potential. You are in your primordial soup phase. The person you used to be has been dissolved by the intensity of what you've seen and understood. The person you're becoming hasn't fully formed yet. You exist in the liminal space between identities, and it feels like dissolution because, in many ways, it is. But dissolution isn't destruction. It's reorganization at the deepest level. You are not broken. You are more awake. The most radical thing I can tell you is this: there is nothing wrong with you. The psychiatric establishment would have you believe that seeing too much, feeling too much, perceiving too much are symptoms of illness. But what if they're symptoms of evolutionary awakening? What if your symptoms are actually evidence that your consciousness is operating at a higher frequency than the systems around you can accommodate? Consider this. In a world built on collective delusion, clarity looks like madness. In a society that runs on unconscious consumption, conscious awareness feels disorienting. In a culture that rewards emotional numbing, feeling everything feels overwhelming. You haven't broken down. You've broken through. And breakthrough, by its very nature, involves the destruction of the barriers that previously contained you. Your old identity was built to function within a certain range of perception. When your awareness expanded beyond that range, the identity couldn't stretch to accommodate it. So it did what all outdated systems do when faced with evolution. It began to dissolve. This dissolution isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. It's your consciousness's way of creating space for a larger version of yourself to emerge. The reconstruction begins. Here's what's actually happening during your darkest moments of falling apart. You're being rebuilt from the inside out. But this isn't passive reconstruction. You're not a victim of cosmic renovation. You're both the architect and the construction site of your own conscious evolution. Every moment of confusion is your awareness reorganizing itself around new information. Every experience of overwhelm is your nervous system upgrading its capacity to handle greater intensity. Every period of isolation is your psyche creating the space needed for internal transformation. Your relationships that fall away are making room for connections based on who you're becoming rather than who you used to be. The chaos you're experiencing isn't random. It's purposeful dismantling followed by conscious reconstruction. Learning to be comfortable with uncertainty. The old you needed to know. The new you is learning to be comfortable with not knowing. This is perhaps the most difficult aspect of integration, learning to operate from a place of conscious uncertainty rather than false certainty. Your expanded awareness has shown you how little anyone actually knows about how reality works. The experts are guessing. The authorities are improvising. The confident voices are often the most deluded. In a world that worships certainty, your comfort with not knowing becomes a superpower. You stop needing others to have the answers because you've learned to navigate by a different kind of knowing. The deep, intuitive wisdom that emerges when you stop pretending to understand everything and start feeling your way through complexity. This is what integration actually looks like. Not returning to your old certainties, but learning to live gracefully with expanded uncertainty. The birth of your larger self. What emerges from this process isn't the person you used to be with better coping skills. It's a fundamentally different version of yourself whose identity is rooted in awareness rather than in the roles, achievements, or beliefs that previously defined you. This new identity is more fluid, more resilient, more capable of handling complexity and paradox. It doesn't need the world to be simpler than it is, and it doesn't need other people to validate its perceptions. Your sense of self becomes rooted in consciousness itself rather than in the contents of consciousness. This means you can experience dramatic changes in your external circumstances, relationships, beliefs, or even your emotional states without losing your essential sense of who you are. You become like water, able to take the shape of any container while retaining your essential nature. Seeing everything is not the end. It's the beginning. Here's the final paradox. The moment you learn to see everything is the moment you're ready to begin actually living. All the overwhelm, all the confusion, all the dissolution, these were just the labor pains of birthing your larger self. Now you get to discover what it actually means to live from expanded awareness rather than just survive it. You realize that seeing everything was never about being crushed by the weight of reality. It was about developing the capacity to engage with reality as it actually is, rather than as you wish it were. With this capacity comes an extraordinary freedom. You stop needing the world to be different than it is in order for you to be okay. You can see the beauty in the horror, the meaning and the meaninglessness, the progress and the destruction, and you can respond to what you see from a place of centered awareness rather than reactive overwhelm. This is what integration looks like. Not seeing less, but relating to what you see with greater skill, wisdom, and emotional sovereignty. Your more lucid life. The life that emerges on the other side of this transformation is what I call lucid living. A way of being in the world that's simultaneously more grounded and more spacious, more engaged and more detached, more connected and more independent. You develop what I call conscious resilience, the ability to remain centered and responsive in the face of complexity, uncertainty, and even chaos. Your relationships become more authentic because you're no longer pretending to be smaller than you are to make others comfortable. Your work becomes more aligned because you can no longer tolerate spending your energy on things that don't matter. Your decision-making becomes clearer because you're operating from awareness rather than from fear, obligation, or unconscious programming. Most importantly, you stop seeing your sensitivity, your depth, your capacity to perceive complexity as problems to be solved. Instead, you recognize them as gifts to be honored and skills to be developed. You realize that the world doesn't need fewer people who see everything. It needs more people who see everything and have learned to respond with wisdom rather than react with overwhelm. This is your more lucid life. Not a life where everything makes sense, but a life where you've learned to dance gracefully with mystery, complexity, and constant change. The falling apart is over. The conscious reconstruction has begun. Welcome to who you've always been becoming.
As we wrap up this exploration, I want to invite you to pause and reflect. How do you feel at the end of this journey? Take a moment to really sit with that feeling. Is it relief? Is it excitement? Maybe even a bit of trepidation? Have you ever thought about your experiences this way before? Perhaps you felt this shift in perception but didn't have the words to articulate it. Now that we've framed it as an expansion of consciousness rather than a collapse, does it make more sense? What single word would you use to describe the new level of awareness you're experiencing? Is it clarity, awakening, freedom, or maybe something entirely unique to your journey? I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below, sharing your feelings and insights. If this perspective resonated with you, let's create a community of shared understanding and growth. Your story might just be the light that helps someone else see their path more clearly. And here's where the journey doesn't end. It evolves. On your screen, you'll see two videos. One might delve deeper into grounding techniques for maintaining your expanded awareness, and the other might explore how to apply this newfound clarity to your daily life. Click on the one that speaks to you right now. Let your intuition guide you to the next step in your evolution. Remember, true transformation isn't about returning to the comfort of the known. It's about embracing the adventure of the unknown. As Carl Jung once said, "I am myself only when I experience myself in the world." You're not falling apart. You're becoming more of yourself, more connected to the reality that has always surrounded you. Embrace it. And with that, here's a parting thought to carry with you. In a world full of shadows, those who see clearly are the real pioneers. Click, continue, and keep expanding. Your journey is just beginning.